Welcome back to Flight Path. My name is Simon, and I hope you've been enjoying this story and reconnaissance flight and exploration of the Battle of Waterloo. And we're getting now to the very end of the story of the actual battle itself. And in the last episode, we were looking at Place Noire, the Prussian attack of Boulou's corps and then Perche's corps, and how that was drawing in Napoleon's reserves across to the eastern side of the battlefield over here, where my white dot is now. And so in this a series of episodes going forwards, now we're going to concentrate more on Wellington's side of the battlefield, but it was important to have this area here, the context of this area here, in your mind when we think about what's going on at on the ridge at Mont Saint-Jean. Just a little wrap up on this area here as well. We're talking about Boulou, and we're talking about the Prussian attack. I just thought a little tie-up here was that Thielman. Now remember, Thielman is in charge of the 3rd Corps, and he was essentially in charge of the rear guard of the Prussian army. He was at Wavre, and Blucher receives a dispatch from Thielman. I believe it was timed somewhere after 4:30. I'm not quite sure, but it basically informs Blucher that he is currently in battle with Grouchy's forces at Wavre. And essentially asks for some assistance, I think. Blucher basically, or Ganasny, sorry, the chief of staff, turns around and says something like, "Let Thielman defend himself as best he can. It scarcely matters if he is crushed at Wavre, provided we can gain victory here." And so that's in the sort of the middle of this battle. That's the thing that's going on, and we will look into the Grouchy's battle with Thielman on this day, and how Grouchy extradites his corps, essentially away and back into France, but we'll do that in the sort of a wrap-up side of things later on. So remember, around about 4:30 is when Boulou would start to attack on the Place Noire thing, and we've seen that through to the sort of end. Let's join it up now with the sort of with Wellington's side of things. We left the Anglo-Dutch army surrounded by French cavalry, and they're the series of charges by the cuirassiers of the French. But the charges of these French cavalry was getting weaker and weaker. The confidence of the Anglo-Dutch squares were gaining, because essentially the cavalry of the French had no infantry support or artillery or much artillery support, and so cavalry against squares were effectively useless after a while. And so the Anglo-Dutch army are holding off at the moment, the French. Even though, remember, we were talking about how it looks from this side, the Prussians come up and they really believe that the battle, it looks like it's lost. Actually, if you've gone into the thick of the centre of Wellington's line, you see that these regiments, battalions and regiments in square are actually holding their own. So essentially around about 5:30 in the afternoon, literally the sort of the fatigue is set in. The French cavalry, the mud, the littered ground with wounded and dead, essentially means that the French cavalry are finding it very difficult even to get to these squares or all the guns. There was essentially around about 6 o'clock, I think. There was a Ney did manage to get a combined cavalry and infantry artillery attack against Duplat's King German Legion, and they were described as being attacking Hugh Halcott's Hanoverians behind the Hougoumont enclosure. So let's fly over there and see if we can see what that area looks like. It was essentially, it was a pressure point, but the British and King's German Legion's batteries managed to sweep the slopes, and then Maitland's guards forces the Tirailleurs off the ridge. And this turns out to be one of the few times on this battle where there was an actual combined infantry, cavalry and artillery attack planned by the French, but it was countered with Adams' brigade on the flank over here. And we're talking this area around here, I believe, is where this action occurs. And they sweep, but they managed to sweep off these the French from the ridge, and the ridge is this area here. Kempt calls for reinforcements and gets the reply back from Wellington that reinforcements were impossible and we must die on the spot we now occupy. And at the same time as Wellington is asking for Wellington's officers are asking for reinforcements, Ney's doing the same thing to Napoleon, and he gets the reply back, supposedly, which is infantry. Where does he expect me to take them? Does he expect me just to make them? So you can see that both commanders are right down to their last reserves. Wellington is in a process as well of trying to drive off these clouds of Tirailleurs off the ridge, and he's getting the guards to form 4-rank lines and volleys and controlled charges to get these Tirailleurs off this ridge at the top, and then getting the guards then to quickly form square again before the French cavalry can attack them. So let's just pause here. I would jump out. So we're talking about this area over this side. So obviously what's happening then, you've got French cavalry. They're literally now on this slope here. And the road at the top you can assume is where the British artillery would have been positioned, and then you've got down on the reverse slope is where all these squares are. And essentially there's a fight going on for the control of this ridge. Cavalry are coming up in waves, but they can't get close to these guys. They've lost a lot of the oomph. And it sounds like then the French skirmishers are coming up here, and they're kind of lining this ridge and taking fire on the squares below. And Wellington, in this sort of area, is ordering his guards to form up and essentially drive these Tyrelliers off the ridge best they can, and then forming up a square as quickly as possible so they don't get charged. And reports at this time is the fighting in the Hougoumont area is starting to wane. The French are basically losing a lot of... they're losing their reserves, they're losing their reinforcements, and the fighting starts to calm down here. And on the eastern side, essentially the eastern side is now is less of a stressful position because the cavalry have already swept this side of the field of the Erlon's divisions, and we've got the presence, the mere presence of the Prussians arriving, relieving the situation on this one here. But there are localized positions that are falling to French on this side. And there's reports of Alten's division and Cruiser's Dutch Nassau contingent getting into serious trouble on this part. There's reports of Lambert's brigade, the 1st battalion of the 27th, was forming square next to the Genappe Road. This is the Genappe Road here. And it's believed that they lost about 400 men without even firing a shot. They were essentially coming under artillery fire and skirmisher fire. And there's reports of Halkett's brigade, essentially the 30th, the 73rd. They had essentially run out of ammunition and couldn't reply in return any fire. Halkett says he felt obliged to ask permission to be withdrawn from the line as a temporary reprieve. Some of his brigade has suffered something like 2/3 casualties. And Wellington replied to him, "Tell him that what he asks is impossible. He and I and every Englishman on the field must die on the spot which we now occupy." So he couldn't essentially allow anybody to be seen to be withdrawing from this position, because Wellington's probably perfectly aware that if one battalion starts to move back, then the others will break and go as well. Alten himself was wounded and had to be carried from the field. Obtegda was dead, and his brigade sacrificed in this area here. Kilsmenzegger was now effectively the division commander, but he was only had 4 battalions in squares, and they were receiving heavy fire at this point. And essentially because Haye Sainte falls, then the French can just advance up and start essentially pouring fire into these squares. So the fighting is now up on the ridge here, fighting control of these ditches and hedges up here. And essentially what you got at this time is Wellington's reserves are completely depleted, and the only way that they'll be able to plug gaps now is by pulling in the flanks. And remember that the cavalry reserve is essentially now down to just a couple of squadrons because of the disorganization after the main charge. And around this point as well, the Prince of Orange is wounded and forced to retire from the field. And 2 of Wellington's aides-de-camp are killed. This is supposedly meant to mark the spot where the Prince of Orange was wounded. So you can sort of see the sort of person this Prince of Orange is, or at least what his dad is like, having this thing built because his son gets wounded when about 50,000 people are killed on this field. This whole monument is essentially built for him. It's a monstrosity. I hate it. Now, remember when this the situation, and we were talking about the Prussians arriving, all they could see was streams of people pouring off the battlefield. And what happens a lot of the time is when someone gets injured, it's amazing how many friends that person has to help them back off the field. So it's almost like every person who's injured has 2 friends to help them walk off. So you can see how close this feels up here. The carnage going on at this time from around about 5 o'clock is just incredible. And we mentioned it before as well, Papelotte and some of these places over here on the left start to crumble just before the impact of the Prussians arrive. And this is the view that Zaitin's chief of staff sees when he arrives here. Is sort of the falling back from this end here, and from this angle, it just looks like the whole front of Wellington's is collapsing. So we talk about Ney asking for troops and Napoleon saying, troops, where do you expect me to get them? Do you expect me to make them? The passion that statement suggests, you know, a couple of hours earlier, you would have argued that there was 14 battalions of reserve back here, but it's exactly that time that Ney's asking for these troops, that the pressure from the right-hand side gets extreme, and so it's that pressure from what Napoleon can see from this angle here is that his immediate use of his reserves is to his right and not to his front. And remember, this is a time when the Prussian cannonballs are starting to fall on this road here at this position. So he obviously feels that that is the priority at the time. And so this window, they call it, of opportunity, you could argue it's a window that Ney has provided. He has the Anglo-Dutch locked down on the ridge here. They're in essentially square formation. This would be the ideal time to throw up the reserve up here in strength at this point. But they're denied by the Prussians. There's arguments about the state of mind of Napoleon at this point. There's arguments here that he has gone into a state of shock, that he realizes that his goose is cooked, as it were, and that's why he reacts like he does. You could argue that the same thing could be happening with Ney. There seemed to be some sort of a frustration between them. It could have been still bad blood from the day before, or the day when Ney didn't react quickly to the retreat of Wellington. There's a lot of ifs and buts about it. Napoleon himself had actually predicted this sort of state of mind. He said at Austerlitz, he said, and I quote, one has but a short time for war. I am good for another 6 years, and then I shall have to stop. So he was aware of his shortcomings or weaknesses, or the growing, essentially, could you argue it's post-traumatic stress disorder sort of effects. Right, there is a good place to finish, I think. And so I'll bookmark that position. And I'd like to thank you all for watching. And when we come back, this will probably be the last part of this stream, and I will do a new stream. We will wrap up this battle. So we have left to talk about is the capture of Haye Sainte, and then the advance of the French artillery up onto the ridge, and then we can talk about the actual advance of the old guard. And so that will be in the next stream. So that will probably be a good 3-hour stream live on Twitch and on YouTube, and we will do that to wrap up the Battle of Waterloo. If you've enjoyed this, please give it a like or subscribe, a follow if you're on Twitch. I'd like to thank everybody who does do that. Twitch says I need some followers, so if you want to be one of these people here to join us on this trip, then please do that. If you've missed any of this stuff and you want to go back, then there's a playlist on YouTube. You can go back. It's all broken up into these little chunks, and you'll be able to find out what happened before. Feel free to leave a comment. If you think I've said something wrong, then say so. If you've got something interesting to say so. If you want to see anywhere, then let us know. And we'll be able to complete this all up. We won't just finish at the Battle of Waterloo. We're going to follow Napoleon all the way back to Paris. We're going to follow him all the way to St. Helena, and we'll finish up the whole playlist at St. Helena. So we've got lots to come still. We'll have, as I say, we've got the Old Guard's attack. We've got the pursuit of into the evening of the day, and we're going to look at the pursuit of the French army all the way back. We'll look at Wavre. We'll look at Grouchy's fight with Thieleman's there, his way that he pulls back from Wavre all the way back into France. And as I say, so we've got a few more streams to come yet on this channel. This channel is just me talking, flying live, talking live. It's never going to be edited, and it's there so that you can see there's a real person talking about real things. So if you want to become part of the channel, then all you've got to do is leave a comment below or join in the stream, and you can be part of the production of this the channel. It's for historians, it's for people who like flying, but it's mainly for those people who always have their finger in the map section of a history book. And we will do other subjects. We've done D-Day, we're doing Waterloo, we'll do the Falklands War next. I want to do the Anglo Zulu War. I also want to look at things like, let me just grab this book. The last moments of Amelia Earhart, and we've got a series as well. We began way back in, well, it feels like a long time ago. It was in Christmas time. We began with a series called Pioneers of Flight, and we looked at Wilbur and the Wright brothers. And so I want to do another one of the Pioneers of Flight, and this is a book I picked up called Amelia Earhart. That's by Mary Lovell. It's called The Sound of Wings, and we're looking into the mystery of her death. That would be quite cool to do. If anyone's got any suggestions for topics, then let me know, and if I've got any interest in it, I'll probably do it. Otherwise, I've waffled on too long again, and I will leave you be as we are flying over southern Belgium in the Huey, and I will see you again soon. Bye bye.